Apologetic conversations. Out of all the information you will take in within this course, this is by far the most important. This is the centerpiece of this apologetics coursework. It is also the one element that makes this course unique when compared to others. You may have all the biblical knowledge and evidence you desire, but if you have a hard time engaging, controlling, and concluding a discussion properly, then that knowledge could be used against you, overwhelm the other person, or simply reinforce their already negative view of Jesus. Our goal is to share the good news, so why not do all we can to do that as effectively as possible? This is the real reason you should be here. This is the crux of how we spread God's word with an obstinate individual in a purposeful way. This is how we decide to dust off our feet and walk away. This is how we repair damage done or avoid generating more damage of our own. This is how we plant that ever-important seed. Starting a conversation. This section is ironic because apologetics is a defense to an accusation. Apologists should never start a conversation by making an accusation themselves. They should merely answer those who make accusations. So congratulations. It is super easy to start a conversation because you aren't the one that has to do it. Is that to say you can never start a conversation? How do I spread the word if I don't start one? This is an apologetics class, and apologetics is defense. No one said you could not start a conversation or share the gospel in general, but it makes no sense to offer a defense to someone who has not made an accusation of some kind. If you desire, there are ways to force an apologetics conversation. The best way to start is simply share the gospel with that person. Many apologetic conversations will come out of this act alone. The second way is to make a blatantly invigorating statement in response to their witness or belief expression. To give you an example, if you're talking to a Mormon and they ask your thoughts about Mormonism, then you can offer some shock value by stating, well, based on my understanding, Mormons don't believe in salvation. This question invites follow-up because a Mormon thinks they do believe in salvation. Only their version of salvation is vastly different from that of actual biblical salvation. This gets the ball rolling on their explanation of what it is in which you can offer counterpoints to. Keep in mind that such a shocking statement could end the conversation right then and there, so don't be surprised by a walk-off. Additionally, when this or any other group comes knocking at your door to discuss how you are living your life, you should already be on defense. They are subtly accusing you of not knowing God. Therefore, from the time you open the door, you are already engaged in an apologetic conversation. So follow the steps in the next section to maximize your results. Carrying on a conversation. While you may never have to start a conversation, you'd be hard-pressed to share Jesus with somebody if you can't at least hold a conversation. Sure, the simple single scripture retort that quiets the masses is effective, and albeit entertaining at times. Engaging in a two-way conversation, however, is infinitely more effective and rewarding. The longer you are able to talk, the more seeds you're able to plant. There is a cutoff point, and we discuss that a little bit later on. There are two methods to use when engaging and maintaining a conversation. It depends on who you are speaking with as to which one to go for. If you're speaking to a person in a staged formal debate, then you use the debate approach. Most of us do not speak in planned debates, thus we will focus mainly on the second method, which is the conversational approach. Both have the same three elements, with the simple difference of when you make an agreement. In the debate method, you get it up front. In the common conversation method, you get it in the middle. The debate method. Number 1, agreement. Number 2, questioning. Number 3, summarization, which can also be known as feedback. In the common conversation method, we have questioning, agreement, and then summarization. Why not use the same method for both? The reason is preparation. In a debate forum, questions are typically predefined and distributed to both parties, thus answers have already been formulated. You know, or at least should have an idea of your opponent's stance on the subject or subjects being debated. You may have even seen or heard them debate other people, giving you an edge on what paths they may take during your discussion. You have prepared yourself for their responses and you anticipate their questions. In the common conversation method, there is no preparation. Many times, the other person will have little to no knowledge about the subject being discussed. It is entirely an impromptu opportunity. Now, this can be both good and bad. It is good because their head might not be polluted with noise, but more open to your words. And it is bad because emotional and physical responses play a role here, which may hamper your ability to share your message. Agreement. Since preparation in the debate method is evident, the audience of the debate has their own perceptions. It is important to obtain agreement up front and base your questions around the agreed-upon elements. If your questions are framed around the agreement, and the agreement supports your stance or can be framed to support your stance in a manner which supports absolute truth, then you've already won the debate by the agreement alone. In the conversation method, agreement comes as the second step because in order to obtain agreement, you must first obtain the information necessary to ascertain the second party's beliefs. Your questions become the building blocks of the agreement itself. In this respect, your preparation is solely done in questions. Questions can help reduce the fear within the conversation. Obtaining agreement after the questioning can nurture trust by reiterating that you are listening to the answers provided. This is known as active listening. To quickly summarize here, the debate method gets agreement up front in order to build a basis for questioning, while the common conversation method uses questioning as a foundation to build an agreement upon. Understanding how to get agreement. Agreement is essential to any apologetic process prior to moving forward with the conversation. Typically, the agreement is all you may need in order to plant the seed because some of the questions you ask to obtain agreement will establish their erroneous logic. Understand that we are basing our truth on a biblical perspective while they are basing theirs on something other than the Bible. They are using something made, uttered, or concluded by fallible man. They believe that the Bible is the fallible source. Since they don't believe in the Bible and you don't believe in their basis of truth, then we have to find the common ground that we can build upon in order to obtain agreement. Now, this is possible. We start by asking lots of questions that invite agreement, phrasing them in a manner that indicates we are seeking agreement. Within those agreement-centered questions, we pull out key words they used to enhance our formulation of what we are asking them. For example, if you're talking to an atheist who asks why God didn't just make people to love him, then we can focus on the key word love here. Key words and phrases like love, choice, or free will can be used to formulate a baseline of agreement. Therefore, we can ask agreement-centered questions, such as, do you agree that as humans we have an inherent need to feel loved? Do you also agree that if we do not obtain such love, then it negatively affects our mental and physical well-being? Do you also agree that in order to truly know you are loved, then the other person must have the ability to not love you? Well, to summarize here, it sounds to me like we both agree that human beings need love and that love is indeed a conscious choice we must make. A Christian also believes that God created us in His image. If we need to feel love, then God must also desire love. Now, He may not need love, but certainly must desire it. So for God to create beings that inherently love Him without any choice in the matter would never present Him with that feeling. He might as well have just stuck to creating animals, trees, and rocks. God created us the way we are so that we could choose to be with Him due to our free will. He may know the outcome of that choice, but that does not preclude us from making such a choice ourselves. In this example, we showed that it makes logical sense, using the Judeo-Christian belief for human beings to be able to choose God out of their own volition versus being forced to do so without any choice at all. We worded our agreement questions in a way that is based on objective, verifiable truths, not subjective ones. Another example would be a question around why God allows pain and suffering. This is one of the most common objections you will face by someone turned away from God due to a tragic event that touched their life. We can ask questions such as, based on what you have said, it sounds like we agree that good and evil exists in the world. Is that correct? Do you agree that without evil we would not know what good is, and vice versa? There are many different routes you can go from these questions, but the point is that these questions have predictable answers that favor the biblical viewpoint. A good moral discussion could come from this one, which establishes that morality and fairness can only come from an objective source such as God, not a subjective source such as man or society, where opinions can clash. In Harvard professor Roger Fisher's famed book on negotiations entitled Getting to Yes, he tells us to focus on principle-centered negotiation and not position-centered negotiation. You will get nowhere when obtaining agreement from a position because each person has their own position, and those positions are typically diametrically opposed to each other. Those positions on both sides are grounded in emotions and personal motivation. If you are negotiating a contract, your motivations are likely vastly different than the other parties. Thus, it is only principle, such as the mutual goal of the transaction, that will act as the point of absolute truth, which will then allow you a basis in which to form an agreement upon. For example, at this time, there is heavy debate around abortion rights in our country. Both sides have their positions. It is pointless to try and come to an agreement based upon each other's positions because those positions are opposite of each other. What can be done is to form an agreement around an objectively verifiable component of the situation, such as the principle of identifying when life begins or when the rights of a person begin. These are the ultimate issues being contested, and are also the principle-centered, not position-centered issues. This example is also good at showing us when to end a negotiation because we see one side consistently refusing to focus on the principal issues and instead is only interested in touting their position, which is solely based on their feelings and not fact. When one side refuses to acknowledge the principle-centered aspects of the conversation, then you know they are not willing to get an agreement in any way. Instead, they're only interested in arguing, or showboating if they have an audience, for whatever personal gain they perceive they will achieve by doing so. It is through principle, however, that we can get the other individual to see things differently for themselves. When we operate on principle, we actually nurture their perspective to change. The person sees the need to change because the principle outlines an absolute. Now, people don't change unless they want to or are faced with a compelling enough reason to do so. So why not give them one? Another great tool to use when obtaining agreement is to identify what the demarcation point is. The demarcation point is a line in which they must cross in order to change. For a belief system, we need to establish what truth would cause the other individual to switch sides. If we include such a demarcation point within our agreement, then we've at least gotten them to a point where we have to make a decision in their own mind. They might not make it right then and there, but at least we've gotten them to the point where they need to engage in some serious self-reflection. When obtaining agreement, you also want to make sure that you are using their words and putting things in their perspective, not yours. Use phrases like what I'm hearing you say is, "Are you saying? It sounds like you agree that." These can help validate their viewpoint while supporting your own. There is always a path to agreement, even with someone who does not believe the same things you do. Agreement can be achieved and should always be achieved in order to properly plant a seed. Questioning. We've already talked a little bit about questioning and even provided some samples in the last section on understanding how to get agreement. Questioning and agreement go hand in hand because we use one to obtain the other. We also use questioning to get the other person to think. We've talked about formulating uncommon questions, questions that they are not prepared for. So how do we do this? Well, questioning is a bit of an art form, but there are some basic concepts to keep in mind that will help you formulate better questions that are out of the ordinary. To start with, we go back to our study principle number 2, and that is the 2 questions we ask during those studies: how and why. How and why centered questions cause us to focus on our reasoning, and it is the reasoning of the other person that is really what needs to change here. When we formulate questions, we need to focus on the reasoning behind their viewpoint. We ask how and why questions to get to the root of how they think. You will find that in many instances you will need to ask multiple why questions in succession to dig deep into the bounds of their mind. You will learn a lot about the other person by doing so. They will also learn a lot about themselves. Most people don't go beyond the first why. But when you dig deeper and ask how that why is a why, you begin to take them on a journey to a level of thought they never went to before. Think about this for a moment. Outside of who did it, what is the biggest question that comes up when someone is murdered? The question is, why were they murdered? Why did someone decide to take their life? What was the killer's motivation? That last one is actually a why question disguised as a what question. We want to know the reason behind their decision so that we can theoretically help others not make the same decision in the future. By asking how and why, we gain the insight we need in order to help the other person see for themselves their need for change. Another relevant question is the who question. This is because our focus is on Jesus while the other person is centered around their God or themselves. Who will play a role in your questioning because of this? It cannot be avoided, so incorporate it wisely by ensuring that your focus is on them and the who behind the things they do. The only time you should focus on you is when you are witnessing about how Jesus changed your life for the better, or sharing a relational story about how he helped you through a difficult time. With all that being said, avoid what, when, and where questions. There may be a time when these are relevant, but typically they are not needed in these types of conversations. Even as we share the gospel, we are sharing who died for us, how Jesus died for us, and why he died for us. The where he died, when he died, and what he died on exists, but it's not as important as the who, how, and why. The final aspect of questioning is studying. The more you understand the scriptures, the better you will be at formulating questions that confound your discussion friend, forcing them to think more. Jesus was great at asking questions that really made people think about the answer. He asked the rich man to give up all his money and follow him, knowing full well that the man's heart was with his money and not God. With the Pharisees, Jesus asked questions that would result in them either not answering at all, or stating that if they answered, then he would call them out for their answer. They thought about his question because they were not questions people typically ask them, but yet the answers to those questions deeply conflicted with their thoughts and actions. Questions are a great way to expose hypocrisy. Jesus knew God's word, and he used this knowledge to ask the right questions. It was some of those questions that caused a long-time Pharisee or two to convert, realizing the error in their ways and understanding that what Jesus was saying was actually true. Summarization. The summarization should be relatively short and simple. After all, the individual has already heard and likely agreed to your questions. The only thing left to do is to reiterate those agreements and surmise your point of view based on such agreements. It is important to ensure you use their words here, being careful not to twist them. If you are practicing active listening, then this shouldn't be an issue, because one of the main reasons we obtain agreement is to confirm that we are not twisting their words and that we have a mutual understanding. The impact comes when the other individual hears it all put together during the summarization and then realizes that they have agreed to your position if they haven't figured this out already. It is now time to end the conversation. You've planted the seed of doubt, and they must wrestle with the internal conflict against their core beliefs. Your summarization can include an offer for further discussion as you part in hopes you can perhaps water the seed and help it grow, but part you should nonetheless. Sensitive subjects such as these require time to think and time to process. Overwhelming the other individual with information is not in your best interest. We do not want to drown the seed by overwatering it. This can actually have the opposite effect. The receiver tends to focus on the excess water they are drowning in, not the seed that was planted. And we don't want to leave a bad taste in their mouth. We want to be gentle and respectful. Controlling a conversation. The person with the power in a conversation is the one that controls the conversation. In order to control a conversation, you must ask questions. Whoever asks the most questions has the most control within the conversation. Whether the person chooses to answer the question being asked or not is up to them. But at least we've posed the question. Oftentimes, by posing the question, you've already planted a seed. All it takes from there is for you or someone else to continue to water it with more questions as time moves on. If you get to a point where the conversation continues and you're able to ask follow-up questions, then congratulations. You've just planted more seeds, increasing the odds that at least one will grow. From there, it is up to God to water them as He sees fit. You see, when dealing with such sensitive personal topics like religious beliefs, the discovery of the answer must come at the hand of the one who needs to discover it. This is why we ask many more questions than make statements. Statements are too easily passed off. When you make a statement, you don't require any work or thought by the other party. When you ask a question, you demand a formulated response that they must think about first. It's a direct deposit into their memory bank. A statement just says you have the wrong account or the wrong bank. When the answer to the question is one that goes against their beliefs, then they become enlightened. Once they answer the question in their own mind, they will decide whether or not to relinquish that answer to you. If it goes against their beliefs and they are honest with themselves, then they will admit the answer even if it makes them look foolish. If they are fearful or being perceived as ignorant, or the anger in discovering the answer was not what they had hoped, then they may very well cover up the answer. Here's the effective part. While they can cover up the answer when disseminating it to you, they cannot do so to themselves. It might be relatively easy to lie to someone else, but it is very difficult to lie to yourself. Reading people. When having conversations of a difficult nature, it is important to understand human behavior. This is known as reading people. People like to think we are different than the generations of yore, but the reality is how we react to situations and the issues we face as human beings are no different than what they faced back when the scriptures were written. This is good because the predictability provides us with familiarity, which reduces our own fears in sharing our beliefs with others. When it comes to communication, the majority is nonverbal, thus we can look for signs that the other person is uncomfortable or no longer listening to what we have to say. Number 1, arm position. If a person has their arms crossed, then they are subtly telling you they are closed off to what you have to say. People that are open and listening have their arms open or at least separated from each other. Number 2, body position. Leaning in tells you the other person is listening attentively, while leaning back tells you they are preparing what they are going to say next, or aren't really listening at this point. Additionally, how their body is turned may be an indicator of interest. Are they turned towards you, or is their body turned towards an exit? If facing you, they are engaged in the conversation. If facing an exit, then they are ready to run right out the door and want the conversation to be over. Number 3, fidgeting. Fidgeting can be a sign of anxiety. It can also be a sign of nervous energy or boredom. All three can inhibit a person's ability to pay attention. Anxiety typically manifests itself in a more subtle manner, one that involves a simple little twitch, tick, or action such as a sigh. Nervous energy will be more overt, involving larger movements of the person's body, such as constantly shifting back and forth or dancing around while you converse. If the fidgeting is anxiety-based, then they could be anxious because of something you said, their response, or general uncertainty. It is best to keep conversations short with someone expressing signs of anxiety. Stress has never helped anyone come to Jesus quicker. Number 4, eye contact. When people look down while speaking, it is a sign of shame. They lack confidence in the knowledge of what they are saying, or they could be lying. Direct eye contact is the best, so try to ensure they maintain it and be sure you do as well. Now, this should not be a stare down by any means, as that is just an intimidation tactic. Instead, it should be natural and feel natural. If you need to look away to remove yourself of general awkwardness, then look to the side or up briefly to cause a break in the contact and then return your gaze. If the person looks up, then they are accessing information in their brain. This is a good indicator that they are taking the conversation seriously and are thinking about what you've said. The brain is behind and above the eyes, and thus it is a subtle indicator that they are searching their mind for answers to your questions. Number 5, pauses. There are two main reasons for pauses during a conversation. The first is when a person asks a question of you and then has a prolonged pause. This means they are seeking information. People tend not to like prolonged silence when talking to another person, as it makes them uncomfortable. They will often be tempted to break that silence with additional information. This is a good practice to get into at asking questions yourself. Ask your question and then wait for an answer, even if it takes a while. You can find out a lot about another person from such an awkward pause. When you ask questions that require a difficult answer, a pause also helps ensure they think through their answer more. It additionally shows you are willing to listen and not just barrage them with more information. When they are doing this to you, they may very well be aware of this tactic, but there can also be another reason, which brings us to the second reason for an awkward pause. When you were younger, did you ever have a crush on someone? When they talked to you, was it hard to talk back? All of those feelings towards that person can make it difficult for us to respond. We worry about saying the wrong thing, or just get so overwhelmed by our emotions that we can't seem to say anything at all. With apologetic conversations, it is no different, with the exception of the feelings being that of anger, confusion, or sadness, versus that of infatuation or love. Our emotions can inhibit our ability to articulate our thoughts. So when you ask a question of the other person and they are pausing before they respond, they can either be thinking about the answer or in a state of emotional arrest. Use some of the other signs we talked about here to gauge which one it is, being sure to be sensitive to how your question may be affecting them internally. Now, this list is not wholly comprehensive, but it does share some of the most common signs to be aware of when having conversations of this nature with others. So be cognizant of the other person's actions to see what they are telling you without actually telling you. Ending a conversation. In the Bible, we see a theme of balance. Being drunk is a sin, however, having a drink is not. Debauchery, aka some wicked partying, is a sin, but celebrations are not. Gluttony is a sin, yet we must eat in order to physically survive. Here there is no difference. You don't plant a seed and then not watering it, expecting it to grow. In the same respect, you don't plant a seed and then drown it, hoping it will grow bigger. You have to have the right mix of planting and watering. You need a good balance between questions and answers. Conversations themselves should be short. I recommend you stick to 3 main questions to avoid overwhelming the person. This is not a hard and fast rule, but if you cannot get your point across in 3 questions, then perhaps the conversation should take one of 2 paths. Number 1, if both parties are willing, it should continue at a later date, when both have had time to reflect on what was said. Or number 2, it should end altogether with no further discussion planned. Inundating a person with information can make them feel stupid. They tend to focus on the last thing you said right before they tuned you out. It makes you come across as arrogant. After all, are you sharing how smart you are, or are you actually caring about their salvation? I can tell you what their perception is. You want to leave a good impression and end a conversation amicably. This is an opportunity to at least help them modify their perspective, which may be framed incorrectly by their experience, so leaving a conversation on a positive note helps break their preconceived notions about your kind. It is always okay to end a conversation when a person insults or threatens you. In the same respect, insults can be a good sign. They indicate the other person may be expressing doubt or uncertainty because you basically broke their synapses. If the insults extend beyond one round, then end the conversation. Never return an insult. We are here to show Christ's love and turn the other cheek. Better yet, say something unexpected. A random act of kindness can quell a situation. In Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Necessary Endings, he speaks of 3 types of people and how they take constructive feedback: wise people, foolish people, and evil people. The wise individual will engage in a conversation. They will listen and thank you for your feedback. This is an open door you can walk through using the tools we provide you throughout this course. The foolish person will not listen or accept truth at any cost because they are too self-absorbed or fearful to do so. They will make excuses and blame others for any shortcomings. Their absorption with themselves clouds their mind. They simply can't get out of their own way. You will probably run into this person most often. For this type of person, you can attempt to plant seeds, but manage your time wisely here. Focus hard on principle, as they will surely bring it back to a position-centered discussion. If the conversation does not seem to be going anywhere, then you've derailed and it's time to abandon ship. Close the door on the subject, find another person to talk to, try a different angle of approach, or just talk about something less intense. The last person, the evil one, can be dangerous. They will plot revenge and attack vigorously. This is unfortunate but true because people that engage you in a belief discussion believe that they are doing a service to society by helping you break free from your ancient Christian ways. They are passionate about their viewpoint because in their mind it is a superior one. They want to exercise that superiority at every chance they get. Typically, if they can't get through to you with words, then they will get through to you by other means because they feel you deserve it. This can even get physical at some point, as some may try to beat some sense into you. So try to be careful and read their verbal and nonverbal cues properly. Evil people as well as fools react the way they do primarily out of fear. Fear of being powerless, fear of not knowing, fear of being discovered, and fear of change. Nobody likes to feel stupid. Nobody likes failure. Nobody likes to be wrong. When we don't know all there is to know about a subject, it is common practice to fake it. Feeling unintelligent makes people uncomfortable. It provokes fear, and fear produces a flight or fight response. It is this set of reactions that you will experience in your discussions. With this in mind, we must monitor our own reactions to the information we are receiving, as well as be cognitive of the information we are sharing. You don't want to reiterate the Christian stereotype of being a fool, nor do we want to come across as evil, pious, or judgmental. So how do we handle each reaction above?